says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell Killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me for a massive set of previews across the Easter long weekend is my good mate, Sixties. How you doing, big fella? I've got 3 big games to preview. No junior reps this week, but massive games in the Flegg Cup and, of course, NRL.
Well, we're playing tonight, aren't we?
I actually had that joke said to me earlier today. Wake up, it's game day, baby. Wait, no, it's not. As you record on a Thursday, obviously, the Thursday night Eels, not a thing until the penultimate round of the season now. So good to have that behind us.
We got plenty of time for that trademark pending, haven't we?
Yeah, got that lodged in the Payton office right now, baby. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Mitch did get that tweet out again about it being match day. So
yeah, it does feel weird, doesn't it? Getting to a Thursday morning as we record, and then there's no game for us to have to worry about in the Parramatta context. Obviously, tonight the Storm and the Roosters do lock horns, the Brandon Smith Cup this week. But for the Parramatta Eels 60s, we've got a game tomorrow on the Jersey Flegg and, of course, the doubleheader on Monday, Easter Monday, with both the Cup and the NRL taking on the West Tigers in their various iterations across the 2 grades. But for now, let's have a quick update for people that are listening to our news podcast earlier this week when we had Quint on board for the first time. We did a little segment on the West Tigers, mate, and getting caught out in a bit of trouble with their, I say Anzac jersey, but their commemorative jersey. And we've since had a major update care of NRL 360. You want to fill us in, mate?
Well, Paul Kent has reported that their investigations have revealed that there was no such seal of approval, no such liaison with the Holsworthy Army Barracks.
Or, I suppose, Fort Holsworthy, if we're going to go with the American imagery.
That's true. And, I mean, yesterday when we were talking about it and we cued the Benny Hill stinger music and, you know, we just had a bit of a laugh about Fort Holsworthy, but this is serious business. I mean, we're talking about like if Paul Kent's investigations are on the money and that there has not been any sort of seal of approval or tick of approval that the Australian Army representatives in Holsworthy have provided for the West Tigers, then that's a serious, very, very serious question that has to be asked of the West Tigers is, why would you put out media statements about this that implicated that, the fault wasn't all your own? Because that's basically what we're talking about. We're talking about that they had not accepted full accountability for this stuff up. And and the more that it goes on, the more that it seems that they haven't been upfront, that they haven't accepted their role in things, fully their role in things, the worse it actually looks, and the more disrespectful that it becomes. I'm just astounded. And this is quite apart from the football team. Like, we're not putting the boot into the football team, and we're saying this with that club being our opponents this week, and all the risks that brings in with the football gods and what have you, because you almost feel like once you stick the boot in, the karma's going to come and bite you on the proverbial this weekend. But, mate, that starts to become the lowest of the low, doesn't it?
Naturally, NRL 360 ripped in like a pack of hyenas going for the corpse because this is that bigger stuff up. But they did raise some valid points, like just conceptually, the whole thing was done terribly. Why was John Bateman, who is a tremendous player, but he's a Brit, like he has nothing to do with the Australia or New Zealand aspect of the Anzac, the Australian New Zealand Army Corps spirit? Why was he repping or modelling the jersey from the get-go? And it comes back to that whole separation of powers that the Tigers have constantly sort of foisted on the media, saying this is a football thing and this is not a football thing. And, last year they had Tim Sheens out there being the shield for all the football criticisms. And now this is very much an operational thing, and they've got the players out there in that big press scrum trying to deal with all the boys. I think it was Alex Twal and John Bateman were copying all the questions there. So ridiculous stuff from the Tigers. And like you said, you don't want to put the boot in too hard because they are our opponents this week, but I don't even know if this can be bulletin board material for the Tigers because...
No, it can't be.
Yeah.
Sorry. Continue, John.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think it can because this is all self-inflicted stuff, and the media's going to pile on the way they do. But this is fair to say it's something of a debacle. So I don't know.
If I can just add my two bobs worth in here, as an outsider with the West Tigers, I've often said that their biggest issue is one around identity, because as a joint venture, they had that relatively early success of the premiership in 2005, which was a validation for the style of football that they played in that particular year, and some individual talents, and I guess that self-belief that they had within that year. But it was quite anomalous when it boiled down to it, because I'm not sure that it was preceded by too much success as a team. And certainly in the years afterwards, it was not something that they were able to replicate. But look, quite apart from that, as a joint venture, it's always seemed that you've had the Tigers people and the Magpies people a little bit at loggerheads. Then you've had issues around locations. Mm-hmm. Where is their home?
No,
is their home
almost
Leichhardt
certainly
Oval?
nomads, right?
Campbelltown? Yep. Is it at Combank Stadium, or as it was prior to that, playing at Accor Stadium? It's they've got a training base that's away from all those three areas as well at Concord, and as good as that facility is, you then wonder, well, is that the venue that's closest to where their heartland is? Some would argue that their biggest heartland might now be down in the Campbelltown area. But so what is their identity? And we've seen with their jerseys have been, I guess, that's had some debate over the years. Have they represented both clubs enough in that jersey? I just look at, and of course, then there's also the venues, about what their venues are like, because in playing out of three venues, okay, they've got they share that. Well, they play some games at our home ground at Combank Stadium, but then you look at Leichhardt Oval and Campbelltown, and as far as modern stadiums are concerned, well, they really sit well and truly in the 60s or 70s in terms of design. If you've got hills like that, you're not a world-class venue.
No.
You're just not. And there was issues around patrons being asked to stump up, $70 a ticket to go and sit on the hill at Leichhardt Oval. Are you serious? I mean, this doesn't impact us. I will go to Leichhardt Oval. I've been to Leichhardt Oval quite a lot over the years and watched Parra and Balmain, and every time I went there, you'd be ages getting out of wherever you parked. And that was always an issue. And we go there quite a bit, especially in junior reps seasons, when they like to play finals matches there. So no stranger to Leichhardt Oval in more recent times, even though I'm not interested in going there as an NRL venue because of the ridiculous prices they charge for the best possible seat that you can get is probably going to be on the hill there, because there just isn't the seating that's reserve seating that's available in modern stadiums. So I just don't get it. It's I find it a difficult ground to get away from, even when there's only the crowd from junior reps. Trying to get out of that part of Leichhardt is just very, very challenging. So I think they've got issues around the grounds. Will they get the funding for that? That's now a political issue. But I think the identity issue comes in again right now with this, because they can't get the Anzac identity right. And just to that point, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, it's called a commemorative jersey. That's what they've decided to call it. And on 360 last night, the consideration was raised that had they picked the problem up internally before the jersey was released, to not release it as an Anzac jersey, it makes you wonder now, doesn't it?
Yeah, because the wording on the jersey is separate from what would traditionally be called the Anzac jersey. It's a commemorative jersey. So, like you said, maybe...
and they'd be the only club. I don't even think I need to check this. Calling it anything other than an Anzac jersey, wouldn't they?
I'd say so, because I mean every other jersey is quite heavily billed as Anzac jerseys because it celebrates the Anzac round in the NRL.
Correct.
So
I mean, where, like, you have to raise the question. Then what you start to think is, what had they known? What sort of communication was going on within the club there in their attempts to cover up where they've stuffed up? Like, if they'd known, I mean, they're talking now that they're going to completely redo the jersey. If it's possible now within this shorter time frame, why didn't they own their error internally in the first place if they've realised there was a monumental stuff up? I just don't get it. And then the club media statements are very, very well worked out. Any club, like, they really spend a lot of time working out exactly how they should word whatever issue's gone on in the club. This isn't someone sits there and works something out in 2 minutes. Like, they would be having meetings about what is the best way to communicate this to the wider media, to our supporters, and for that statement to come out as it did about the consultation with Holsworthy, like, if as I said, Kent's story is spot on.
Troubling implications for the West Tigers there. Like, that is.
Oh.
Anyway,
Yeah.
let's wrap it up about the West Tigers, mate. Let's get into the Parramatta Eels. 3 games across the Easter long weekend, starting on Good Friday with the Jersey Flegg. The Eels in the Flegg being a real revelation across the last 3 weeks. 60s, after that 0-2 start, they're now 3 straight wins on the trot, playing fantastic team-orientated football. And as expected, Coach Craig Brennan isn't making changes unless facilitated by injury or promotion, or suspension too, I guess. And looking at this team, we start at fullback with Lindsay Munro, who's going to hold down that number 1 jersey, doing a wonderful job there. Very talkative, live wire with the ball in hand, great positioning play as well. On the wings, Terrell Williams moves out from centre to the sideline to accommodate the return of Samuel Loizu in the centres, but he's partnered on the flanks by Lene Fetarica, Will Latu, the other centre, alongside Samuel Loizu. In the halves, Ned Hicks and Makapua Fisi, Brock Parker, Jonte Junior and Beffa Meza, 2 excellent front rowers in this grade. They're going to bookend Jacob Davis at dummy half. Jock Brazel captains the team on one edge with Max Tupu on the other edge. Nicholas Lenars, the lock forward. On the interchange, Riley Lack, Tyson Chase, Nikhil Raffo, and Noah Reid. That's your guy right there. 60's the 18th player, Lachlan Mears-Crab. They're playing 11 o'clock a.m. out at Lidcombe Oval, taking on the West Tigers. Eels enter this week in 5th position in the Flegg. They're taking on the 7th place Tigers, so very similar seedings on the ladder here. Eels 3 wins, 2 losses. Tigers 2 wins, 2 losses, and a bye. If Parramatta play the way they've been playing, mate, they honestly can be fair competition for anyone in this competition. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how long they can maintain this high level of play, because it truly is high levels of play. Excellent completion rates, getting to their kicks consistently, terrific defensive pressure. I mean, it is very professional football that they're playing right now.
It is. They're winning the middle. That's been critical. They're showing a lot of defensive grit. They did have some late tries that were scored on them by the Dragons on the weekend, but they were off scrum plays where they just got the numbers for scrums that were set inside the quarter, and the Dragons got over right in the corner itself. So outside of that, it was a very, very solid win over the Dragons, and and it backed up an impressive win over the Panthers, and prior to that, a come from behind victory over the Sea Eagles, where, geez, they just had so much that went against them. They had the captain, Jock Brazel, was sin binned for something that he shouldn't have been sin binned for. He was adjudged to have made a tackle on a player without the ball and in a try-scoring situation, and that just didn't happen. Like, the player had the ball, so that was unfortunate. But the comeback, maybe, that facing the adversity that they did that week was the trigger for them to play the brand of football that they have been playing. And it's, as I said, my belief is it's really being established on the back of what the forwards have been able to achieve. And I, as you alluded to there, I gave a bit of a plug to Noah Reid. I liked what I saw from him, especially last week in his game. He's 6'5", has the background coming through the Knights system there, and reached representative levels with Australia and New South Wales coming through the system there. He finds himself now at the Eels. I think he's obviously looks like he's been a very good pickup, and his post-contact meters, I didn't have any figures on that when I was talking about it before, but just on the eye test, they were impressive. There are highlights of Parramatta's game against the Dragons that are available out there on the New South Wales Rugby League site. I'd encourage people to have a look at the sort of football that they're playing for the tries that they've scored. But that, of course, doesn't sum up the entirety of their performance, which, as I said, has been really based on winning the middle.
And I think this is an unchanged lineup from the one that took down the Dragons last week, because Loizu was a late inclusion ahead of kickoff.
Correct.
In round 5. Yeah. So you talk about consistency of roster selection. It's been a real privilege for the Jersey Flegg right now. They haven't had too much disruption outside of Matthew Komalafi going up to the New South Wales Cup a couple of weeks ago. And obviously before that, Arthur Miller-Stephen too. But they're being consistent in their roster selection, and it's no surprise that you're seeing those results on the field on the back of it. They don't really have to change anything, do they, this week, 60s? It's not going to be a case of overcomplicating things. Go out there, win the middle of that really rock-solid forward pack, and in the back line, you've got guys like Terrell Williams and Loizu who are going to give you an opportunity to finish off things, as well as Lindsay Munro, who has been a real surprise packet, because not just because he's light on his feet, which you'd expect from a player of his frame and speed, but the communication, the organisation, the ability to be there on and off the ball consistently, has been fantastic. He's been a real energizer for this team from fullback.
Well, dare I say it, he's possibly their X factor.
Yeah, really can't disagree. He's
it's I think you've pointed to his assets just then, and I guess that's the only way that I can sum it up, because he brought those qualities into the team, and it wasn't that they didn't have certain qualities at fullback, because Arthur Miller-Stephen, when he's promoted to the New South Wales Cup, has had the sort of form in his 2 games up in New South Wales Cup that warranted his promotion as well.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, he's injured right now, which is to the detriment of the New South Wales Cup team as well. But can also you've referenced Samuel Luizio. I thought he had a very powerful game last week. His carries were about as strong as I've ever seen Samuel carry the ball. He played I guess over the last couple of years, where injury has stopped him from being in the team, but he's been increasingly physical in the way that he plays the game. And I thought that this last match summed that up. And also the captain, Jock Brazel.
Mm-hmm.
We know that he's been earmarked by the Eels for higher honours, in that he's someone that had an extended time in the Eels pre-season this year. He had a lot of the SG ball, a number of SG ball and Flegg players that took part in the pre-season prior to Christmas. He had it a little bit extended after Christmas. I think it was obviously part of his contract that he did so many weeks of the pre-season. And he just seems to he missed all of last year with that knee injury, and he just seems to be. I'd suggest that I'm seeing some of the best football that I've seen from Jock Brazel. He's obviously older than when we were last seeing him in action as an SG ball player, but I like the way that he's very aggressive in both his carries.
Yeah, the physicality of his game. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. He looks like he's going to develop into a very imposing back rower. Like the opposition will know that he's in a game. And also another shout out to, I think Nick Lanaz he's not the biggest player that you're ever going to see. And he started the season at dummy half. We know he's been a player that's alternated between dummy half and a lock position, but he's embraced that move to the number 13 role. And instead of being the one distributing the ball, he's been doing some enormous hit-ups. His defence has never been an issue. He hurts when he tackles.
Yeah, he's an attack dog in defence. He gets in there.
But for Craig Brennan, when he wants to give Davies a bit of a rest at dummy half, he just shifts Nick Lanaz into that role. So he's really been able to. I think his performances have also been instrumental in the Eels' victories over the last few weeks. If people have a look at those highlights, you'll see that the spectacular try that's scored by Jock Brazel, which is their second try, is actually instigated by a massive hit up from Nick Lanaz and an offload as he starts to breach the line. So he gets that offload away in contact, and then it just starts the string of passes that lead to the try being scored. So, yeah, mate, we're going to cover that game.
Yes, we'll be out there tomorrow with live updates across the 70 minutes of Jersey Flegg action. A win tomorrow, 60s, keeps the Eels in touch with the top. The Roosters are undefeated right now. They're 4 wins, 0 losses, 1 bye. So they're out there on 10 points. The Eels enter this week on 6 points. But the Dogs and Sharks are in second and third with 8 points apiece. One's got 3 wins and a bye. One's got 4 wins, no byes. But then also the Penrith Panthers, who the Eels defeated a couple of weeks back, are there with 2 wins, 2 losses and a bye. So a win here keeps you very much in play for the top 4 in the early exchanges of this season. So, yeah, it'd be important to bank that against the West Tigers this week.
Yeah, what you're really looking for when you're a team that's been fighting hard for wins is that if you're coming up against a team where maybe you have an expectation or other people have an expectation that you're going to be victorious, that you don't let that impact on how you play your football. And as you said, there is a good formula that the Eels are following, and it's there's nothing fancy about it. They just look like a well-drilled team right now with everyone knowing their role. Mm-hmm. And you just want to see more of the same.
And then between the 2 grades, Jersey Flegg and New South Wales Cup, there's a long break from the Good Friday to Easter Monday transition, where the New South Wales Cup plays curtain raiser to the main event in the NRL fixture. 1:40pm kickoff for the New South Wales Cup 60s. It's out at Accor Stadium. The Western Suburbs Magpies hosting the Parramatta Eels. Of course, the Tigers, being a joint venture, have the different teams in different grades. So looking at these 2 teams, a bit of NRL talent spread across both of them, actually. Dane Laurie at fullback for the Western Suburbs Magpies, Will Smith, Brandon Wakeham, former Parramatta Eels prospect Tarsi James, Alex Seyfarth. So, yeah, the Magpies not bereft of NRL talent in their lineup by any means, 60s, but for the Parramatta Eels, they look like this, with Dejan Arce getting his first cap at fullback for the Blue and Gold after playing at centre for the first couple of weeks since returning from an injury. On the flanks, we have Isaac Lumi and Matthew Komalafi. Wanga Blake, who's been dropped from the NRL, will turn out in the centres for the New South Wales Cup, where he'll partner Zach Sini. Jordan Rankin, Jake Arthur, unchanged in the halves. Already spoken about Jake earlier this week, 60s, in a tremendous run of form here. Hopefully he can continue on Easter Monday. Offiki Ogden, Kai Rodwell, and Mitch Rain round out the front row. Tony Matteelli, Matt Dury, the other player to make way in the NRL with the return of Sean Lane. They're the edge back rowers. Luca Moretti, the lock forward. Jaden Yates, Dan Keir, Jerome Masia, and Tavita Taumapenu, the interchange. Nico Apelu, the reserve. Like I said, 1:40 p.m. kickoff here, 60s. Eels come into this round. I believe they're behind the Western Suburb Magpies. Yeah, it's 6v8 with 3 wins, 2 losses for the Magpies, 2 wins, a draw, and 2 losses for the Eels. So the Eels half a win back on the Magpies, a chance obviously to leapfrog them on the back of it. But yeah, this is one where they've got some serious question marks to sort of have to contain in the back line. Dane Laurie's speed, Will Smith's experience, Brandon Wakeham's ability to run the ball. Got to respect each and every one of those. But the Eels looking pretty solid on paper.
Yeah, very much so. You referenced there the form of young Jake Arthur. I will be writing a spotlight post on Jake over the weekend just to highlight some of what his stats are. That's beside the eye test of what we've seen in how he's been playing football. And there was a very interesting post that was written by Luke Lewis on New South Wales Rugby League about him seeing the future of Jake as a lock forward, which is interesting considering that this year is being used as a consolidation year for Jake. Brad Arthur is using him exclusively as a halfback in the New South Wales Cup, giving him time for him to, I suppose, get his expertise in the number 7 role to a level where it's commensurate with his development, I guess. I think Jake has always done a fine job playing in NRL, but he wants that consistency of directing a team for 80 minutes. And I think that's a fair enough call as well for someone who's only just recently turned 20 years of age, just at the end of last year. So having him as the backup half in the club, providing him with more experience in the halfback role at a senior level is probably the best for his development at the moment. And he's showing that. Like he's just absolutely dominating in the team. So, but outside of that, you've mentioned some other names there. We're seeing Dejan Arce playing in the fullback role, and how many different players have filled in this role during this short season so far? We've had Jordan Rankins played there at fullback. We've had Isaac Lumi filling in at fullback. Who else have we had playing there at fullback this season?
So we started Jordan Rankin, and then Rankin moved into the halves, which meant who played the other week?
Oh, of course. Arthur Miller-Stevens.
Arthur Miller-Stevens, correct. And then he got injured, which also corresponded to the return of Isaac Lumi from suspension. So we had him at fullback and now Dejan. So been a fair bit of rotation in the number 1 jersey for the Eels. With the return of Sean Russell in terms of health, that probably puts a little bit less pressure on keeping Dejan in the centres, which then paves the way for him to return to a position I think he's got a bit of familiarity with between fullback and 5'8", where he's more experienced positions when he came to us via the Warriors and the Cowboys.
I guess one of the challenges for Parramatta in this regard is if you haven't had someone who's playing in the fullback role regularly, and much the same as what we were just talking about with Jake, getting that time consolidating his and developing his skills as a halfback, his game management skills, especially because we've always known that he's a game manager. So that goes without saying. But at that senior level, we're talking about someone who's been a teen playing against older blokes. So it's, that is important when you're talking about development. Now, as far as Parramatta's concerned in the fullback role, there's been a fair statement used like, if Gutho's injured, who comes in as fullback? And the answer basically at this stage is someone's going to be playing fullback who doesn't regularly play fullback. And that's not ideal. So when you start talking about Dejan Arce playing at fullback, will he now get to play that role consistently? Is he filling in until Arthur Miller-Stephen returns? If Arthur Miller-Stephen returns, does he come back in New South Wales Cup or does he come back in Jersey Flegg? So, because he's
a lot of questions, isn't it? It's very, very interesting to see how it's all going to play out. Obviously, depending on the return timeline for Miller-Stephen, hopefully not too long because it's looking real sharp in the Cup. But yeah, getting someone to be able to hold down that fullback spot and not necessarily be the heir to Guffer right now, but just be his deputy in the short term is important for the club. In terms of the players that join this team this week, 60s, Wanga Blake and Matt Doorey, what do you need to see from them this week? Wanga obviously struggling for form in the NRL. Sorry, hope he's not struggling for form in the New South Wales Cup. Where Matt Doorey was the player to miss out in that big reshuffle facilitated by the return of Sean Lane. For Doorey, maybe there's a silver lining here in that he gets to really get that match fitness up and get back to being an 80-minute player on the back of that knee injury that he's been coming back from. But for Wanga and him, what are the key factors this game?
Well, I think you've pretty much summed up with Matt Doorey. I think what he needs is 80 minutes of football, and being an edge player, that's probably what Coach Nathan Kalis is going to be looking for from him, is to get as close to 80 minutes as he can out of him. And then once that game time comes back up, well, then he's for a start, he'd be back into consideration for an interchange role anyway. But when it comes to Wanga Blake, I just need him to play uncomplicated football that allows him to get his confidence back up. He is a specimen of a player. We've seen flashes of that during his time with the Eels, like little flashes of it. But he is such a player that I suspect really lives in his head. Like moments in games, I think might impact him more than some other players. Either if something good happens in the game early and his confidence is up, then we're going to see something special from him in the game. Conversely, if something goes wrong early in a game, it feels like that's the sort of thing that can compound into a bad role of a bad sequence of moments throughout the game for him. I mean, we do obviously have that Panthers game that maybe it's talked about a little bit too much with the yips that he had under the high ball. But I think in referencing that, we can say that's probably symptomatic of a player who has talent but lacks confidence. And it just feels like he has lost all confidence at the moment. And you can't have a player in first grade if he doesn't have belief in himself. No. And I'm saying that from the outside looking in, but that's what he looks like at the moment. A player doesn't believe in himself. So, what's your take on it, mate?
Yeah, I feel like Wanga, it's all mental, isn't it? Because like you said, he is absolutely a confidence player, has an early good involvement, gets a try or a try assist, and you can see him really settle, has that early drop or mistake, and suddenly he's inside his own head. So just going back to the New South Wales Cup, I mean, you mentioned in the earlier podcast this week that you saw, I believe it would have been Josh Morris, but one of the Morris boys turning out in the Cup and looking like an all-world player because of his combination of experience and physical prowess. And that's what I just go see Wanga do. Go out there, run the ball strongly, tackle strongly, and really take control of his competition at this level. And for Matt Doorey, obviously, it's about getting those minutes in his leg, and he's a physical wrecking ball. So will he be playing with? Will he be playing down the left edge in this one? I'm not sure.
I'm thinking that's probably my thought of where it would be. I think Jake has a pretty good combination with
Tony.
Tony Mattaielli on
But
the other.
Jake also has a
side.
license to play both sides too, so he'll probably be a factor there as well. But yeah, just working with Rankin there, obviously down that left edge, then, and just being very physical, and that's probably going to be his, not calling card, but like sort of aspirational goal out of this is just to be physical, play the 80.
And bit of a shout out to Luca Moretti, who has really kicked on this year to the point where it's not going to necessarily surprise me if he gets a little bit of NRL game time later in the year. If he continues the path that he's taking at the moment, he's right up there in stats on for forwards across the New South Wales Rugby League competition. And yeah, I just think he's probably starting to show what we suspected he might when we got him from the Roosters club.
Mm-hmm.
So, keep an eye on him. There'll obviously be a lot of people who are able to see the game live out at Acor on Monday. There'll be a lot of people who'll be able to watch it on New South Wales Rugby League, I believe, who are covering the game. Is that right?
I believe it'll be on Fox / New South Wales Rugby League, yeah. So you have plenty of accesses or means of access for this game if you can't get out there.
Yeah, so keep your eye on him. Keep your eye on Tony Mattaielli with his charges into the edge there. Good to see Kai Rodwell starting to get a number of games under his belt. He had that injury which kept him out for a couple of weeks. And Jaden Yates coming off the bench, mate, he's such a workhorse, Jaden. He really brings the energy, the line speed. There's plenty to like about him when he comes on. He's primarily comes on and plays dummy half, but he can play that lock role. So, the other player that I always like when he comes onto the field is Tavita Tomapenu, who he is a physical presence as well. So, watch him when he comes off the bench as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid all-round team. They're starting to get back to full health, and obviously the injection of some NRL guys there in Blake and Dury should hopefully catalyse both those players individually and the team. So they'll be playing at 1:40 p.m. out at Accor Stadium, which leads us to the main event following this game with a 4 p.m. kickoff at the same venue, as you'd imagine, Accor Stadium. The traditional Easter Monday clash between the West Tigers and the Parramatta Eels. It being at Accor would point to it being the West Tigers home game, and that is correct. The Eels had it last year, and we changed on a yearly basis. Quickly going through the West Tigers team, 60s. They've got some changes for this roster, but mostly the same team that's been there for the first 5 rounds of this competition. At fullback, it's Charlie Staines. You've got Asu Kapoa and Junior Tupu on the wings. Brent Naden and Stafford To'a in the centres. Adam Dewey and Luke Brooks are in 5'8" and halfback respectively. Stefano Utoikamanu, Apiasai Coruscant, David Clemmer, there's your starting front row. Former Parramatta Eel Isaiah Papali'i, John Bateman and Fanua Pole in the back row. On the interchange, Jake Simpkin, Alex Twal, Joe Ofungahi and Sean Bloor. Extended roster, Justin Matamua, Alex Seyfarth, Brandon Wakeham, Rua Ngatakura and Dane Laurie. Now just looking at that team there, I don't think Justin Matamua was named in any of the other grades, so he might be an NRL inclusion here. That was the first thing that jumped out to me here, is that he was not named in Cup. No, you got Seyfarth and Ngatakura. There's a few players from that extended roster named, but no Matamua. So maybe there are some shenanigans at play in terms of the forward pack.
Yeah, it's who knows what's coming out of the West Tigers these days, mate. But what we have to make sure that we do is whoever takes the field in the opposition, you have to respect what they can do.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm looking at that team. I was a bit skeptical of his health in terms of that shoulder, but John Bateman's been like tireless for them. He's been busting his backside. Api Coruscant's also had some flashes, but just not having people go with him. So they've got some players that can cause, disruptive plays. So the Eels will have to be awake to that. But like I said,
I was just going to say, just on that point too, if I can just interject, one of the issues around having changes that are significant, like what Coruscant's gone through, and I think to an extent that's happening with Josh Hodgson as well, is that it doesn't matter and I was full of praise for what I was seeing from Josh Hodgson out there in the preseason on the training track, is that once you get into the matches, that the fact that the combinations are new in a match scenario, if the communication isn't quite right as yet, if the players aren't used to playing alongside each other, they're having to grow into that. And I think maybe that's been what's happening with Api Coruscant, because we know what he's capable of.
Mm-hmm.
He's a premiership winner multiple times. So he should be delivering more for the West Tigers, but I think that has as much to do with how new the combination is around him, and the fact that he is one of the new players in those combinations. It's such a crucial role to be new to the unit and to be at your most effective. We're probably going to see better from Api Coruscant as the season progresses. I'm hoping that it doesn't start with a real breakout game for them this weekend, because we know how dangerous he's been against us in the past.
Yep. Now, talking about the Parramatta Eels, 60s, we got a whole raft of changes, sort of somewhat tipped by the presence of certain players in the New South Wales Cup, but let's get to them. At fullback, captaining the team is Quinton Gufferson. On the wings, Micah Sever will be on the left, but Hayes Dunster, making his return to the NRL, will be on the right. Been well over a year for Hayes since he sustained that full knee reconstructive injury in that trial against the Dragons. Been a real arduous journey for him, but he's done fantastically well to get back to this point and be in NRL contention regardless of suspension to other players. His form had him right in the conversation. Really looking forward to seeing what he can bring to the team on that right edge in conjunction with Will Penasini. But that brings us to the centres. With Will holding down that right edge, you're going to have Sean Russell making a very timely return from a shoulder injury, coming back into the team at left centre. Russell, not super experienced in this position in terms of pure game time 60s, but he has trained here in the preseason extensively, and this was certainly an outcome that the team was prepared for, to get Sean back into first grade.
He had to fill in when Wonga Blake had the broken arm. And prior to that, he'd been playing on the wing at training outside Will Penasini. And yeah, as I said, then when we had the broken arm to Wonga Blake, we saw him filling in at centre. He's a footballer. Sean Russell is a footballer. And he's been adaptable across a range of positions, be it wing, be it fullback, now centre. I guess what we're looking for is for, again, well, no, I want to narrow it down. What I want from Sean is defence, because what we were seeing from Wonga Blake was he had some real issues in defence, right? And that was causing that side of the field to, I mean, we didn't see a lot of confidence from the defence on that side of the field. And it was just, there wasn't the communication that was there. I think we're going to see an improvement with Shaun Lane being back over on that side of the field as well. So that's gonna help. Shaun Lane is a great communicator out there. And maybe he's been that missing link in all of this, because have we seen the best from Dylan Brown this year?
I think it's fair to say we haven't.
And if we've also seen Wonga looking a bit at sea, and we've had those times from Dylan Brown where he's looked a little bit at sea out there, but Dylan's always been strong defensively, but we saw issues where there just didn't seem the communication in defence, and even it almost felt like Dylan Brown's decision making in defence wasn't always what it should be, especially in that in the game where I think it was the really soft tries.
Sharks.
Was against the Sharks. Yeah.
Quinn Gufferson got sin bin and they just scored some really easy tries down our left edge. Well, not sin bin, he got concussed. Sorry, I'm saying sin bin. He got put in a concussion protocol for nothing.
Yeah, so you've got two talkers out there who were missing in both Clint Gutherson and Sean Lane, and then you see how that exposed, maybe players that aren't great communicators in Dylan Brown, in Wonga Blake, and Mike Acevo. It just seemed to be that they looked all they honestly, we were concerned watching that it might have been a case if they just kept going there that they'd post as many tries as they wanted on the line. And I've never ever felt that way watching Dylan Brown play or Dylan Brown defend, because he's up there in the elite class. But I think maybe that the big factor there was that Sean Lane wasn't out on the field, and we know Sean is big on communication out there. So, So what I'm looking for most, just to get back to that, is the defensive side of things. Just making sure that Sean reads the defence well, because it is defending at centre would be one of the toughest jobs, because you're probably making more one-on-one tackle.
You're on an island. It's you get left with the worst outcomes where the teams have that sweeping fullback creating 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s, etc. So it is a very difficult assignment defensively. Going to be interesting to see how he handles it. But he'll be working with Mike Acevo, who's not exactly chump change when it comes to the defense. He's pretty solid, and hopefully that works out pretty well for him. Coming back to the halves,
but it is that as a winger, you have to follow the lead of whatever the centre is doing.
Yeah,
and I think that's the challenge that's been a bit of a challenge for Acevo, because if what's been happening inside him, if there hasn't been as much certainty about it, we've probably seen him making Acevo make some successful jams, like really jamming in, and has he been left with any alternative when he's made those plays? I don't think he has. I think he's had to make that really quick call to jam in, because it's been obvious that we're in trouble if he hadn't jammed in. So yeah, you're right. He's made some good calls, but really wingers, they can look good or bad in defence depending on what happens with their player on their inside.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, continuing with the team with 60s in the halves, we've already spoken about Dill, but he's in number 6, Mitchell Moses, number 7. Front row, unchanged from last week, Reagan Campbell-Gillard, Josh Hodgson, and Widdrum McGregor, who did a pretty good job, honestly, 60s. As much as you could probably nitpick some of his struggles defensively getting back into the line, he took on an extra workload and did a pretty solid job there. In the back row, Sean Lane, he's back on that left edge. It pushes Bryce Cartwright to the starting right edge, which in turn pushes Ryan Madison from the right edge to lock forward. So we've got a big sort of cascading reshuffle there, and those cascading changes carry on to the bench, where Jermaine Hopgood will move to the interchange after starting at lock forward for the first 5 games of the season. He's joined on the interchange by Brendan Hands, Jack Murchie, and Makahesi Makatoa. We spoke about a New South Wales Cup team list, but Matt Dury, the man to make way at the very end of all those changes. He's on the extended roster alongside Jake Arthur, Ofahiki Ogden, Kai Rodwell, and Wonga Blake. So it's funny how quickly we go from complaining about bench depth to having someone like Matt Dury missing out. That's just the nature of football and getting guys healthy. But Sean Lane's inclusion, massive in this team. Do you like the configuration that Brad Arthur and the coaches have gone with, following his inclusion on that left edge, putting Cartwright to the right edge, Madison the start, Hopgood to the interchange? Would you have done it differently? Or is there something you would have just considered maybe before making that change?
I think it's hard to be critical of the change, and my thinking on that is to do with the players that have been moved. So we talk about Jermaine Hopgood. Now, he started off the season on fire, but I think he's paid the penalty for the amount of defensive workload that he's had to carry. And when I say pay the penalty, I mean that there's been aspects of his attacking game, which we saw in the opening rounds that we're not seeing now, where he's not having as much of an impact. And that's easy to understand because, first of all, you're talking about a bloke that hardly had any first-grade games under his belt at all before he's come to the Eels. He's essentially been a New South Wales Cup player prior to now. Now, we think he's been a major NRL talent running around in New South Wales Cup, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he hasn't been used to playing at the intensity level or for close to 80 minutes that he's been required to do since joining the Eels. And I think it reaches a point where it starts to take its toll. And I think it was taking its toll on Jermaine, not in a massively bad way, but I think that BA's taken the step of arresting that before it's got to the stage where he's going to have him burnt out. So I think that's really been a individual player management decision there. The other thing is too, I think there'd been a little bit of doubt around how much of an impact our forwards had been able to create in these first few rounds. I'll tell you what, that's a massive size pack that we're fielding there without Junior. Reg is, if you see Reg in person, he is a massive human. Like, he really is. Wirramu, my goodness. Sean Lane is the tallest man in the world when you meet him. I mean, he's not really, but he is, if you get my drift.
Mm-hmm.
Bryce Cartwright is quite the athlete. Then you look at the size of Ryan Madison at lock. Now look at the bench, and you're going to have to see that there will have to be a careful rotation there, because that size isn't replicated on the bench, is it? And maybe is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it just the way that it is? I guess when you've got Junior out of the action and Matt Dury getting time in New South Wales Cup, that's the outcome. I think we've all agreed that Jermaine needs that time on the bench, but he's not a big body. He's not small, but he's not a big body. He'll bring a different type of impact. Makahesi Makatoa is a worker when he comes onto the field, but he's not an impact player. He's not going to smash through the middle. Same with Jack Murchie. You know, he's probably, he might have a little bit more skill level than Macca. He's got a bit more in the passing game, but he's still going to play a similar role and be a worker when he comes on. And of course, we've got Brendan Hands who's going to provide relief for Josh Hodgson, but no one's going to come on and be like, say, Murata Nyukore, for example. So, and there's no one that has the size of Oregon Kaufusi that's on the bench. So, you know, I think it's going to be interesting, because when Junior comes back, then someone of size is going to push back to the bench, maybe Wirramu. So it's maybe not going to be the case. You've referenced Wirramu earlier about the criticism that might be there for how quickly he can get back in defence. I said that the Roosters did a smart job where they picked a couple of times where he was jogging back in a position after making a tackle, that they played very quickly around the ruck, got the ball away to someone who's hitting it up right beside where he was running back into position. Now, to an extent, that can't be helped. When you're talking about someone as big as Wirramu making the tackle, then getting up off the ground to get back into position, as a team, you're going to have to wear the fact that if you want to carry someone of that size with his mobility or maybe lack thereof, what you're going to get in terms of his powerful carries and post-contact meters and the physicality in defence, where he's going to mostly hurt people with his tackles. The trade-off is a little bit of issues around mobility. So I don't blame him. It's if I'm his size, getting back into position, I don't think I should be expected to be getting back as quick as say a Bryce Cartwright or even someone as big as Matto should be able to get back. So he's just not built that way.
And in terms of our opposition, what's the game plan for the Parramatta Eels 60s? Do they just keep it simple? Do they be more expansive, more aggressive? Is this a game that you go back to the fundamentals after sort of digging a hole for yourself in the opening exchanges against the Roosters of those sin bins? Do you just focus on highly disciplined play, or do you just play what the Tigers give you?
I guess if we're just going on exposed form so far this year, we've seen that the Tigers have perhaps been overly reliant on an expansive game. Like they've really tried to hit the play down both wings, like really spread the ball, almost play that 2005 type Tigers football. Whether there's a change in thought at the moment as they hit that point of being 0-5 and, hey, things aren't working. We've already seen the change up in key positions that's happened. If we go on exposed form, I'm not too frightened by the type of attack that they've been dishing up. However, I suspect that type of attack has been what's taken away from Api Coruscant. I think if they push a little bit more through the middle, they can cause us some problems because they've got some faster players around the middle. And you'd have to think that if Luke Brooks is going to have one good game a year, it might be this game where he's coming up against a good mate in Mitch Moses. So he's probably going to be about as focused as he's ever likely to be. He's got a good foil in Api Coruscant that's there. And John Bateman, he's got that fast leg speed, that footwork, that because he's not a big body by any stretch of the imagination. He's just tough. So there's a physical presence about him, and he's got that fast leg speed. He's got a bit of unpredictability about him. So I'm more worried about them maybe changing things up a little bit than what we've seen on exposed form. Can you prepare for them to change it up? I don't know that you can. You've got to be, your preparations have to be based around mostly based around what they've done as a team and also what the predilections of certain players might be in terms of how they play. So, it's I just don't know what to expect from West Tigers. I don't, mate. I honestly don't. I mean, you can understand the frustrations of their supporters.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Because they've had times in games where they have threatened to take the opposition's defence apart, just like keeping the ball alive, making just stretching the defence, and then it's like a horrible decision will happen. Like someone will do something, and you just go, "Are you serious? Did you just do that?" And it's, I don't know, is it symptomatic of a lack of discipline within the team? As I said to you, my concern is that there will be various factors that will have particular players in their team really focus this week.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, at least a couple of those are in the spine, in Coruscant and Brooks. And like maybe Dewey's got a point to prove with his being moved around different positions. Brooks has probably got a point to prove with all the criticism that's come his way and playing up against Moses. You got Api Coruscant coming up against the grand final opponents. and wanting to prove that he was a key part of the Panthers' victory by leading the Tigers to victory in this one. I don't want to feel like there's an upset on the cards, because I don't think there will be.
I mean, in reality, if the Parramatta Eels play to anywhere near their potential, they'll absolutely pump the West Tigers, even if they play plucky football. But unfortunately, that hasn't been true the last couple of times these teams have met. It's been way closer than it should have been, to the point where the Tigers actually sprung the upset in the corresponding match last year.
Yeah. Look, as I said to you, I think that Sean Lane is a massive inclusion in this team. I think you're going to see the mail that I get out of the sheds is that the players are really positive in their mindset. Like, they have not taken in any way a battering in terms of confidence from how this first 4 or 5 weeks of the competition has gone, and they're not getting ahead of themselves in any way. Like, they're not cocky and thinking, "Oh, we shouldn't be being beaten," or anything like that. "Oh, we're gonna get this one." I'm talking about that. There is a belief that they should have done better, could have done better, that they aren't too far off the mark, and if they just keep focused, that the results are going to come their way. And I think you're going to see a lot of players. I think there's a lot of accountability in this team, and I think they're going to have a positive approach to this game. We saw last year that there were games where it's a horrible hackneyed phrase, but where we didn't turn up. And I think it's fair to say that game against the Tigers last year, they didn't turn up with any sort of game. They didn't follow any game plan against the Tigers. That was one of their worst performances of the year, even though they only lost by a field goal. Like, the Tigers, I mean, Hastings played a very good game in that match, but he's not with the Tigers now.
Yeah, here was the difference, obviously, with that big field goal he kicked in Golden Point. But, yeah, for the Parramatta Eels, like I said, if they play to near their potential, they should be away with this one in a canter, which does lead me to our prediction 60s, with the Eels looking to bounce back from a frustrating loss against the Roosters, while the Tigers got absolutely pummeled up north of the border. Which team bounces back best?
Yeah, look, I think that I can't see anything other than an Eels win. And if we play as we should, we win this game comfortably. Let's very quickly look at all the pros for our team. Gutherson's playing some of his best football at the moment. We'll agree on that. We've got Sean Lane coming back in, so that we'd like to think that's going to produce a better brand of football from Dylan Brown. Mitch Moses had an outstanding game against the Panthers in terms of game management, and I thought he tried his backside off against the Roosters, and some of the defensive plays that he was coming up with against the Roosters, you could see that he was just doing everything in his power to try to steer the team, try to keep the team in the game last week. Will Penasini, apart from that missed tackle late in the game, he was having an outstanding match against the Roosters. What I want to see more from is Mike Pasivo.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to see better yardage from him. I think we know that Hayes is going to give his all in that regard. Hayes has this knack of beating the first offender. He has like just a little bit of a step, and then in contact, he's got quite good leg drive. I'd like to think we're going to see him give everything that he's got there in his carries from the backfield. It's a big ask for Sean in that regard, because you want the back five to be making those early meters in the sets. So, but Sean plays a really brave brand of football. Like, he doesn't shy away from contact one iota, but it's a big ask first up after returning from his injury. Outside of that, Reg had a quiet game last week against the Roosters, by his standards.
Yeah.
I think he'll bounce back in a big way this week. And as I said, I think that we're going to see Sean Lane's influence being really important. And I think we're going to see a reinvigorated Jermaine Hopgood. And it sounds strange to say that only 6 games into the season, when he started off on fire in those first 2-3 games, to start talking about a reinvigorated Jermaine Hopgood. But I think we'll see him bounce back to what we were seeing from him in the first couple of games of the season. So I think there's a lot of threats in our team. To me, defence is going to be key for us in this. We don't want to get into another high-scoring battle. We don't want to concede tries. We don't want to play touch football with the West Tigers, do we?
No, absolutely not.
And when we've played our worst football, it's been that we've literally played some touch footy with the opposition. So, yeah. So, mate, I guess we're at the pointy end of our preview.
Yes, let's get the big calls out there. I mean, we know that these two teams can play gritty, ugly, close games. I'm going to tip the opposite. I'm going for a big win here. Eels 42 to the Tigers 12.
That is a big call, mate.
Yeah, it is a big call. But, I mean, once again, I'm just banking on the Eels actually playing to their potential here. I think Sean Lane's a big in. I think Sean Russell and Hayes Dunster are also significant inclusions. And I think that on the back of like the players you mentioned, Reagan Campbell-Gillard having a down game, he's going to bounce back. We're going to see guys like hopefully Mike Acevo bouncing back. So across the park, if the Eels do what they need to do, they should win and win well.
I'm seeing us scoring a similarly high number of points, but unfortunately, I think when we haven't quite got all of the defensive moments sorted, I'm going to tip a 38-24 win. So I still think it'll be 13 plus, but I think we might leak more points than what I would like. I may change my mind if we get too much more in the way of rain and it becomes a wet track. But yeah, I'm thinking the 38-24.
And then first try scorer. I mean, there's some interesting storylines you can go with here, boys, with the returning trio of Lane, Russell, and Dunster. I don't know if any of them catch your fancy 60s.
I'm gonna go for Mitch Moses.
Mitch Moses? Yeah. I will go for Captain Quint Gufferson. So it'd be nice to see one of that returning trio also being in the mix for the first try scorer. But yeah, I think the captain for me. And then best on field. Well, I think it's, there's going to be a number of players contributing massively if you're going to be scoring 40-plus points. But given how quiet he was last week, I'm going off Reg.
Yeah, I think that's a fair call. I'm going to go with the model of consistency in the King, in Gutho.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard. If I'm picking anyone else at the moment, it's a matter of supposition about how they're going to play. And I know what the King's been delivering in the last few weeks. I think if he delivers the same again, he'll be right up high in that mix. So I think for me, that's my safe bet is the King.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, we'll give it a wrap there. Eels have 3 games across the weekend, starting tomorrow on Good Friday for the Jersey Flegg, into that doubleheader on Easter Monday, 60s. Plenty of football, even without the junior reps, who will be back for the finals the week after. So they're hitting the pointy end of the season there. First time all 3 grades have been in the finals for the junior reps, which is an awesome moment for the club. But we'll be on that next week. For now, though, thanks for stopping by and giving us a listen. We'll catch you guys in the next episode.
Go you Eels.